Welcome back to Astrology in the News. I'm Jaime Dimond. 5 days ago, JP Morgan Chase CEO Jaime Dimond, while in a meeting with financial colleagues, said that he felt that there was a financial economic hurricane on the horizon. He cited two situations that could be contributing to the looming financial hurricane. One was the ramifications of the lockdowns that began in 2020, and the other was the war in Ukraine. But specifically, the fact that the price for oil is skyrocketing and we're seeing inflation, and also that the commodities reaching the market from the lack of production because of the war in Ukraine, specifically wheat and things like that. Europe was creating sort of a vacuum for commodities, and this was set to hit sometime probably in the late fall. Now, this all makes sense because we know that the farmers depend on the price of oil. We know that truck drivers also depend on the price of oil. If farmers have a tough time buying oil for the tractors, buying fertilizer for the crops, if truck drivers have a hard time transporting those commodities because of high diesel prices, we're really in a little bit of a crisis that is looming at this point. I don't want to panic anybody, but I do think that if JP Morgan is telling his colleagues to tighten up the belt and to be extremely conservative with financial risk in the coming months ahead, I think that it's good for us to do the same. So I want to take a look at the chart and I want to see, is there a way we can use astrology to sort of glean something about the future? Can we forecast potential financial difficulties coming? So that's the first thing for tonight's news that I want to take a look at, is just the financial situation that could be looming ahead. Let's take a look at that now. First, I just want to go ahead and read the article. Now, again, this was 5 days ago, so this isn't particularly brand new news, but it has been stacking up over a couple of days. So the article reads, I got this from Forbes, and it says, Jaime Dimond, the CEO of JP Morgan and one of the most respected Wall Street Journal leaders, gave a stern warning to investors. He advised people to prepare for an upcoming economic hurricane. Now, in the article, it goes into the fact that sometime before, he came in and advised people that there may be some stormy clouds on the horizon. But then he came in later and, as per Mercury retrograde, I could imagine, and then changed the gloomy weather or gloomy clouds to more of a serious hurricane-like event, comparing it to the Sandy hurricane. At the investor conference on Wednesday, Jaime Dimond, the hurricane is right out there down the road coming our way. The chief executive added, we don't know if it's a minor one or a superstorm Sandy. You better brace yourself. And the article goes on to say, the causes of concern include the Financial Reserve Bank and the government discontinuing their financial stimulus programs started during the pandemic to keep the economy afloat. Instead, the Fed will enact a quantitative tightening program. This new policy is the nearly direct opposite of what the banks did during the pandemic. Now, Americans will see a contractionary monetary policy that will decrease the amount of liquidity within the economy. The policy is the reverse of quantitative easing, easing, which aimed to increase money supply in order to stimulate the economy. So I think that people familiar with the astrological language, when we hear the words like reverse and contractionary, which is just another word for like constriction or austerity, and especially reverse, we're familiar with these words as the way that we see the gods, the stars of the gods and goddesses of heaven moving. We interpret the movements of these gods or these planets, and this is the language that we're familiar with. So those are the symbols and the clues I think we could look to if we want to delineate something from this article. So let's go ahead and pull up the chart now. Right, so astrologers that specialize in financial forecasting, we're talking about Saturn, Uranus, and Pluto as the most likely candidates candidates to indicate financial situations in the astrological mundane chart. I tend to agree with that because, again, Saturn, Pluto came together at the very beginning of the pandemic. And then we also had that Saturn square Uranus aspect that went in and out all during 2021 when we had the lockdowns. And all of that basically is, the cause of what we're seeing right now. And then we heap on a war and other things that are coming after, but essentially we're looking at these planets. So what I did is made the chart simple here, and I took out some of the inner planets and I left Pluto, Saturn. I did leave Neptune and Jupiter and Uranus, and I also put Mercury in there because Mercury is a god of markets and exchange. And what I did is I just ran the chart forward, I just animated it, and I watched for red lines to appear. What I found is that on August 14th of this year, Saturn and Uranus will again form the last square that they're going to make with each other for decades now. So essentially, you can see August the 14th, we're going to re-enter that same type of aspect during the lockdown. So this is a symbolic form of continuation, some link to financial causality that began during the pandemic that again extends its arm outward along the timeline. So this is how I'm looking for financial prognostications. I'm going to look to aspects that seem to have some relevant link to the cause of the situation that brought about the circumstances that we're in now, sort of the cause and effect. So we had that Saturn square Uranus during the pandemic. And of course, locking down the economy is going to have some future ramification in the economy. So when I see that Saturn Uranus coming back into square in August, which is not that far away, that to me seems like a likely candidate for prognostication of financial situations to come. Now, I'm going to get rid of this line so we can go forward here. You can see that on August 24th, Mercury is at the edge of his exaltation sign of Virgo here, and then it jumps over and crosses the sign boundary. So now this is what we have. We have Mercury, the god of financial markets, the god of exchange, the god of money changing hands. We have this god that is exalted and in its own domicile when he or she, depending on what mode this god is in the sign of Virgo. So when Mercury is in Virgo, it's as good of a place as Mercury could possibly be. So that's very significant. Now, what is quite interesting to me is if we go forward, by the time we get to August the 30th, right there, you can see, I'll make a arrow so you can see this highlighted, but Mercury begins to form an opposition with Jupiter back to Aries here. Jupiter is still in Aries, still going retrograde at about 6 degrees. So why do I think that this is important? Well, Jupiter in Aries could represent, we all know that Jupiter can represent things that become expanded. Right now, it seems like the inflation of the money, the price of fuel or diesel. Remember, the planets do not cause things to happen. They show us what is happening. And what is happening is that while we have Jupiter in Aries, we are having inflation of the money supply. We are having a war. We are having discord in the society right now, which Jupiter can represent. But specifically here, what I think is really interesting is you have the god of money who basically gets super downgraded out of his dignity. He goes from as high as he can be to, coming off that high horse pretty rapidly as he enters the sign of Libra, and immediately comes into an opposition with Jupiter, a god who seems to be representing this inflation. Jupiter expands and Mars can inflammate, right? So you have, in my mind, you have a little bit of the financial situation being exacerbated by the inflammation and the expansion, that heat of the money in the society kind of becoming radicalized and expanded and growing almost out of control. Now you have the god of Mercury in a direct opposition to that. So there is definitely some kind of tension there as we enter August 30th now. And then we go forward here and watch what happens. Mercury stays in this opposition, but Mercury is not going very quickly. And we can see right here, Mercury, you see that little S right there? Mercury is stationing to turn retrograde. So this is by September the 9th. So not only is Mercury being downgraded as he leaves his exaltation sign and moves into Libra, then forms that opposition to Jupiter, a planet that seems to be representing the inflation right now of the money supply, forms an inherent tension with that. All of that is happening as Mercury is slowing down to a stop and about to reverse fortune. And that's where I go back to the Jaime Dimond article where he says there's a reverse. So we can see a reverse of fortune here. So not trying to get too excited, but you sort of just have to put the clues together as best you can. And you can put those together however you want, but this is how I kind of came to this understanding myself. And I would love to hear other interpretations of this because there's probably 1,000 just as good or maybe even better interpretations of financial prognostications. But essentially, this was fascinating to me. And as we keep going here, I'll get rid of the circle. If we keep going, now Mercury begins to retrograde and goes back into that opposition, now reversed its course. So the money supply goes up. It's really, really good. And then what does it do? It goes across the sign boundary and crashes, opposes Jupiter, all that inflation, as it's slowing down and ready to change fortune and reverse and go backwards and then hit the opposition again. Wow. To me, wow. Now, watch the sun and Mercury. I'll draw a circle here so you can see this. Watch the sun and Mercury as I go forward in time. We got September the 14th. Look at this. They're coming together. We're working our way towards the Cazimi moment. And look at that. Watch this. They both, there we go. They both Cazimi as the sun jumps into the sign of its fall. The language doesn't sound good, folks. And it's immediately going to start making that opposition now. Now, this is quite interesting. I'm not sure exactly what to make of this, but it seems like we get a little bit of a break all of a sudden. It's like there's a Cazimi and things improve for the moment. Mercury jumps back into its exaltation sign of Virgo there, continues to go back. Now, it will begin to make this opposition to Neptune, which it had previously done before it jumped for the first time into Libra. There is some interesting, potentially hidden or subversive tension that Mercury is going through, but Mercury somehow is riding high again. The money supply could be riding high again, but it's going through that opposition. And now we see by October 1st, Mercury is stationing and it's going to reverse course and go forward. So things improve for the moment here. We get this stationing of the money god. And now we're going to go forward and watch Mercury come back. Now, again, though, Mercury jumps signs, loses dignity. Something goes down. Now, we're even in a worse place than we were before because we have the sun in its fall in Libra, and we have Mercury going direct, but re-engaging with that Jupiter opposition. Mind you, the entire time that this is happening, we are still within this Saturn Uranus square. So, that is quite interesting. I'm going to go ahead and put the rest of the planets back in so we can have just a full picture of this. We can see that Mars is making a dominant square to Venus from Gemini. Venus is also in Virgo and just entered Virgo. Now, Venus is depressed in Virgo. So Venus can represent luxury, food, comfort, the things that we need that sustain us, like the sustenance. Definitely, it can represent the entertainment or the frivolity of going to the movies or something like that. So when you potentially have a planet that represents those things also going down at the same time, but to make matters worse, Venus is receiving a superior upon the 10th dominant square from a malefic planet. And we look to the condition of that planet to see how is that planet treating Venus. Well, the malefic planet Mars is in the domicile of the temple of Mercury, and Mercury is stationing and about to reverse fortune. That is not the best host for Mars. So Mars is kind of a little bit junked up, and now he's acting aggressive towards Venus, and Venus is in her fall. This does not seem like the happiest of days, I have to say, folks. And then we also have one more interesting thing. If I go forward here, we have Venus essentially going into that opposition to Neptune about September 20th. It just seems like there are a lot of indicators that I'm not even sure if this is going to be a financial situation per se, but this is definitely something, but it does seem to be timed out about the right time that you would expect things financially to not be so great, because we've had this war that has had a major impact on our food production. The cost of oil and all of these things are kind of compounded right at the time where farmers are expected to bring in their crops. And if gas prices keep on escalating like they're predicted to do, then this just makes it hard. It's almost hard not to see how we aren't going to, get to the harvest time this year and suffer some kind of real austerity, So, and again, we have Saturn making that square, that dominant square back to Uranus. So there is the austerity there. So this is how I'm reading the potential prognostication of what Jaime Dimond said in the news. I would love if there's anybody out there that can give a different take on this. I would love to, hear what that could be, because this is quite a complex thing to undertake. But I just wanted to see if there was some potential situation that could represent that. Now, astrology isn't something that can predict exactly what will happen. It is just a language of symbolism. And if you have enough skill, you may be able to decipher something from those symbols in an accurate way. So again, tell me what you think in the comments and let me know what's happening. If there is something to this take on it, I think that this could serve to really just prepare us as much as we could be prepared. People were saying, every time you drive your car out, don't wait to fill it up. Like, fill it up every single time you go, because the price keeps on going up. And in the long run, shaving that little bit off or beating the price increase by, even on a daily will add up after a while. So things like that, maybe buy some extra things at the store and stock the garage with some cans and things like this, because that's stuff you can always eat. But if the prices goes up and you need it and there is a run on supplies or, anything like that, it's just better to be prepared. So if Jaime Dimond is telling his financial institution managers to be prepared, I figured, it can't hurt for us to be prepared as well. So that is what I'm seeing for this story on the potential hurricane-like events that hopefully will not come. So that is how I'm seeing that potential story. Now, I want to end on a little bit of a positive note. It's not always that we get news that is something good. So this is kind of nice. One thing that I was really, really happy to hear, the Abbott infant formula plant in Sturgis, Michigan, announced that it will restart production. This announcement came on June the 4th, but it was on June the 3rd that you can see right here, Mercury stations. So by June the 4th, Mercury is now going direct again. So that's really cool. So we do tend to get announcements in the world when Mercury turns direct. So we have the announcement that something is going to improve. Well, what improved? Well, we do see Venus right now back in her own temple, in her own domicile, in her own home of Taurus. So this is really positive things. And this means that Venusian things will tend to improve. Now, remember, Venus had previously gone through Aries, and this really was the main portion of the timeline where this infant formula shortage was really an intense thing in the nation. But when did it begin? If we go back a few more days, actually, we have to go back weeks ago. It began on February the 22nd here. And I think this is a really interesting delineation. So you can see that Venus and Mars are co-joined in the sign of Capricorn here. So that's really, really interesting. Venus is the domicile ruler of Taurus, ahead of Capricorn, and Mars is the domicile ruler of Aries, ahead of Capricorn. But what is interesting to me is that Mars, remember, is a malefic, and Venus is a benefic in the ancient language. But what does Venus and Mars have to do with baby formula and shortages and things like this? Well, this is an interesting question, but I think the clue here is that Venus, as a domicile ruler of the sign of Taurus, Taurus is the time of year where sustenance blooms back into the springtime lands. We get the milk from the cows, we get the green grass that the cows can eat. So the Taurus moment is really a month that you see life returning, and it's all about sustenance. So, and it's all about young life being able to suckle off of that new life spring sustenance. So Venus has a relationship to that young sustenance. And when I believe Venus conjoined with Mars, this began a karmic cycle. So you see the cutting off or the severing of that sustenance beginning on February 22nd, when the plant announced that it feared there was a possibility of some bacterial contamination in some of the batches, and it voluntarily cut off production, a Mars word. Now, as we move down the timeline, essentially, by a matter of weeks here, we could go. You can see that they go, both planets go through Aquarius, then they go through Pisces, and then Venus enters Aries, and this was on May the 3rd. And May was really the big month. If you remember in the news, this is when Biden had to, talk about what he could do to potentially alleviate or support the formula being transported to different places in the country. And this is really when the situation was at such a intense crisis in the news and in the nation, that's really when you saw that. And it really played out as Venus went through the sign of Aries, Mars's domicile. And we can see, if we just go day by day now, and we've got Mars entering on May the 25th. And now we see that Venus then exits the sign where she is in detriment. This is a place that she doesn't like to be. Then she enters her own domicile and picks up tremendous ability to behave exactly how she wants to be. She's at home. She has everything that she needs. And so this symbolizes Venusian things just going better, having better fortune, better luck, things going more smooth when we have Venus in her own domicile. And so I thought that was a really neat thing that we saw Venus enter a sign where she picks up tremendous dignity in the ancient language. And lo and behold, we get by the 4th. Not only do we see the plant saying, "Hey, guess what? We're gonna get back to production, and this should really alleviate this infant formula situation a lot." We also get the announcement on the exact day that Mercury goes from the past retrograde moment and decides to change fortune stations in the sky, and then begins moving forward in a new direction. So we have the plant announcing that they will restart and move forward in a new direction. So I thought this was a really cool story, and sometimes it's really fun just to see how simple just a few planets interacting in the sky can somehow mysteriously mirror events down here on Earth, the dramas that we experience in our everyday lives. So that's what I've got for this episode of Astrology in the News for June the 7th. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, leave your comments in the comment section below, and I will see you. Take care. Bye.